Charlotte Kemp helps people and companies determine their preferred futures. Please welcome Charlotte, the Futures Alchemist, to SAPICS 2023.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's me again. I'm not Charlotte. This is Charlotte. Thank you, Charlotte. Welcome, and thank you for being here. It's late on a Tuesday afternoon. I am sure you're going to entertain us with some very significant insights. Charlotte Kemp is the Futures Alchemist, a futures keynote speaker who works with organizations to co-create preferred futures. Charlotte is also the immediate past president of the Professional Speakers Association of South Africa, and also, very importantly, the president-elect of the Global Speakers Federation, and is a professional member of the Association of Professional Futurists. All I know about that is Back to the Future 1 and 2. and we still don't have flying cars. Charlotte is also the author of a number of books, including Futures Alchemist, which presents a narrative of how to use a map, compass, and guide model to navigate the unknown. Charlotte also serves on a number of association boards and steering committees and works as an association futurist. So thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, please, do fill in your speaker evaluation forms, and now there's competition between Paul and Charlotte on who's going to be the best speaker. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you so much. Am I good? Nice sound? Good. So from that introduction, clearly I love associations. And a body like this that has put so much into this conference and all of the different streams and the different events and the showcases outside there is really phenomenal. And I'd like to bring some of that to your attention in terms of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm talking about exponential thinking. So we got the hot chocolate, now it's story time. So if you'll bear with me, we're going to go all the way back to a fictitious ancient Persia. And in ancient Persia, there was this emperor who held court, and he had all his courtiers come and serve him, and he had entertainments every evening. And after a while, because he was so wealthy and so successful and had so much land, he got a little bored with some of the entertainments, and he decided to set a challenge that he wanted a new entertainment. He wanted something new to be brought to him. So he sent all of his courtiers out to come up with new games. And various of them came back and they experimented with different ideas, and then one courtier came back with the game of chess. And he introduced this new game and the new rules to the emperor and explained the different tactical movements about the chessboard. And the emperor was very impressed. And he said to the courtier, "This is a game worthy of me and my empire. Tell me what you would like as a reward." So the very, very clever courtier who had come up with the game of chess says, "Emperor, I would like, please, from your wealth, 1 grain of rice, doubled for every square on the chessboard." And the emperor looks at this beautiful game, looks at this courtier, puzzles about how clever this man really could be, and says, "Well, of course, absolutely, you can have that boon." And he calls the treasurer in, and he tells the treasurer, "Please go ahead and give this courtier his rice. 1 grain of rice doubled for every square that's on the board." So the courtier leaves, very happy. The treasurer leaves, a little puzzled. Everybody else stays and plays their games. And a few days later, the treasurer comes back very humbly into the emperor's presence. And he's humbling and he's bowing down, and he really does not want to be there today because he has to explain to the emperor just how much rice this calculation means. And it is an exponential number that there is no way the emperor can grasp. No way anybody in the court, apart from the very smart courtier, had actually worked out. And that phenomenal figure is the problem we have, because we have a problem with exponential thinking. We can't grasp those huge numbers in our brains. And that is why we can't cope very easily with a lot of the things that are happening in the world these days as we move so rapidly into the future. You may very well know this particular prediction from a man called Gordon Moore some years ago. He said the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. So the number of little circuits on these transistors on these circuits will double, the size will get smaller, the computers will get smaller, but the power will get exponentially more fast. And it's a number that when you plot it out in a graph is exponential. Let me do it this way. Exponential, it goes up. And we're not used to exponential thinking, we can't grasp it. And computers have got so much faster. Peter Diamandis is a futurist, works with Singularity University, and he explains us the problem that we're having. He says, in the past, our lives were local and linear. Local means you lived in a town or a city, but you knew people around you, in the blocks around you. You recognized people. And things were linear. If you looked forward, you could kind of anticipate what comes next. In fact, there's a calculation he does. He says, step outside of your house, look down the road, and count out 30 steps. That's a linear progression. You take those same 30 steps and you make them exponential as opposed to linear. You go around the world. Not once, not twice, but something like 18 times around the globe. That is 30 steps exponentially. And the present moment that we're in is global and exponential. The present moment, not the future. We are in a global world where we can have an event like this and draw people from around the world. We can have our meetings online, and we can draw clients and form relationships with people anywhere in the globe. We don't need to be local anymore, and that is our present moment in time. So how do we as leaders or professionals in our space cope with this? So I want to take you back to this calculation. Anybody ever done this calculation with the grains of rice? You ever seen this? All right. I'm going to try and read it to you. It is 18 quintillion, 446 quadrillion, 744 trillion, 73 billion, 709, no, that would be the million, 551,615. I did not do the maths, but that is maths from actual experts. Thank you. I have to practice that every time beforehand, and I don't know how it gets to be, an odd number. Somebody said, surely it can't be an odd number if it's doubling, but I think that might be the very first grain of rice makes it an odd number. Now, for any other audience, I would say, you could not begin to imagine the logistical supply chain questions and issues that the treasurer was facing, having to gather all of that rice together to potentially pay that courtier. But this is the audience, you're the only audience who could ever begin to imagine what that would look like. It was more rice than was in the kingdom. It was more rice than that it was in the far-flung lands that the king had taken over. And he just simply did not have enough rice to pay this courtier his award. So what was the king's response in this case, the emperor's response? Well, he called the courtier in a private meeting, told him that he had been deceived, the king had been deceived, and that this kind of deception wasn't allowed in his kingdom, and he had the courtier's head chopped off. He killed him in response to the agony of having to deal with an exponential calculation like that. And that is a problem that some of us have. Imagine going to the CEO of your organization and telling him that you've got a problem that is an 18 quintillion size problem. They're not going to want to hear you. They cannot grasp these kinds of figures. And that's what we're dealing with. So the problem is, I said, Peter Diamandis talks about this being at the moment a global and an exponential world. As we're looking into the future, we're now dealing with a quantum world where things can be in superposition, which means that things can be in the same place at 2 times. If we have a problem trying to deal with exponential, we can't get our minds around quantum. So superposition is the ability of a quantum system to be in multiple states at the same time. If you look very carefully at that little image in the background, that's what we start to think of. It looks really pretty. It looks really pretty, but we can't do anything about this in real life and business. This is then what happens to our brains. Our brains become literally overwhelmed by the pace of change that we are dealing with. And we've already heard this afternoon about artificial intelligence, Midjourney, ChatGPT, all of those different challenges. When we're faced with that, our brains cannot cope. And that is a brain scan of a brain under stress. When our brains are under stress, we physically produce cortisol and adrenaline and other stress chemicals in our brains, and that shuts down our higher order functioning. We can't make logical decisions. Now, the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is not to make you more stressed. I want to work with organizations to help them find better ways of coping with the future, not to cause you more stress. But we need to fully grasp what the challenges are and how our brains are not at the moment coping with those challenges, and we need to think differently. We need to approach our future, our leadership, our work in different ways. So, we want to be very intentional now about how we think about the future, how we develop. I don't want anyone to think that they have to go and get a degree now in futures thinking, but a little more intentionality about how we approach these things may lead to some better results. So just think about this as a very simple model where at the bottom we have a mindset that needs to be open to challenges, to changes, to discovering new things, that needs to be open to these conversations about artificial intelligence and what platforms like ChatGPT can do for us. You'll very quickly realize if the mindset is wrong, either yours or someone else's, because there will be a knee-jerk reaction or a gut feeling of anxiety. Like, this is bad news, this is scary, this must be wrong. And we try and resist the changes because we don't know how to process them. All I want you to do is just to take a breath in that moment and say, this is something new that we're going to need to embrace, to think about. And as you relax into that, then you open your mind up, you give your brain an amazing computer that is still more powerful than any of the computers we have. You give your brain permission to explore these new ideas. Once we have a mindset, I need to let you know that there is an incredible tool set. There are tools and models and platforms and processes and analogies that help us to think about the future in better ways. So we're not just making this up. There's real stuff that we can use, that any of us can use. And I'll introduce one to you shortly. So there's a tool set that you can use to approach the future in a better way, to make better decisions. And once you've learned a tool, just like any kind of skill that you have, if you're playing sport, if you're learning painting or wood carving, you have a set of tools. Now you need to learn how to use them. You develop a skill set. And once you have that skill set, you can create better plans, processes, business models, supply chain arrangements than you could have before. One of my favorite authors is Sir Terry Pratchett. He wrote a lot of fantasy, and he says it's very hard to talk quantum using a language that was originally designed to tell other monkeys where the ripe fruit is. And that is our problem, is that when we start talking about quantum, we can sound either really sophisticated or just really like we're kind of repeating slang and things that we've heard that we don't understand because we don't quite know how to explain it really well. And I've listened to the explanation of what quantum computing is. I've listened to about 10 different versions, and I still am a little wary about how to explain that to other people. So we need to recognize this. We just need to recognize where we're coming from. So let's develop a framework for our thinking. Let's look at this mindset to start with. And one of them is to realize how much has already changed, how much we have already gotten used to. I know I'm going to give away my age here, but I remember my very first day on the internet. I went to an internet cafe and sat down at the internet for the very first time. In our lifetimes, for those of you who are like my age and above, in our lifetimes we have seen everything that we do at work completely changed because of computers and the internet and access and now artificial intelligence and everything else. We've seen it change, we've coped, we're here. So it's not impossible, but so much has changed. Retail has changed. Now, when we look at these changes, it doesn't mean that there's never anything like the old version of it. We still have some places that embrace older versions, older models of doing work, or they're available for certain kind of niche audiences or other needs. But we're living in a world where our retail can be online, where you can order your Nomu mayonnaise, Meimu, online. You don't have to go to Spar. You don't have to go to places. So all of these things are online and available to us. Banking has changed. From having to stand in banks and in a brick and mortar building and stand waiting for a teller, we now do our banking online at any point in time. Our services have changed. How we access the personal services that we need, that we can get our groceries delivered to us by an app without ever knowing the deliverer's name. Media has changed, how we get our news. We don't just have to get it the old-fashioned paperback way. Energy has changed. Not completely, not sufficiently, not here, but we now have access to new forms of energy that we didn't have before. All of these changes have happened, are happening in our lifetimes, and we're still coping with them. When we get back to our workplace, we need to look at other things. We need to know that leadership has changed. It's not the old military model anymore. It now has to be collaborative leadership. It's not the kind of top-down control and command process, but drawing people together and drawing out of them those skills and insights that they have that mean that they can do more amazing things that they could ever have done in a past version of leadership. And this is really important because all the technologies change, but the people change as well. Our values have changed. Our way how we interact with each other has changed. The voices of people who have not been heard sufficiently in the past, that is changing. And we need to understand that. So we need to be prepared to discard any old model that no longer serves us. If there's anything in your business, in your process, in your department, in your career, anything that you have a certificate for that you've earned, if it no longer serves you, you have to be willing to discard it. What got you here today will not get you there in the future. So we have to be willing to let go of some of those things. And that is the real challenge of our mindset, is to say, but this has always worked. It's always been done this way. We've got such good results from this in the past. We need to let it go. Then we can move on. What has changed for supply chain? Very broadly, all things internet. I mean, all the technology, all the artificial intelligence, all the big data, the machine learning, all of that kind of technology gives you much more power and insight and wisdom than you ever had before. And that's all because of technology. The other thing that has changed vastly for supply chain, a lot of what I've seen in the brochures and the agenda for the last few days has been about everything sustainable. Not depleting this planet anymore, but actually building supply chains and processes and decisions that can enhance the world as opposed to depleting it. And everything to do with people, because people are an essential component of the work that we do. We're not just the kind of HR units that are on the side that have to do certain functions, but how humans engage with the work that you're doing makes it more meaningful. So those are three vast areas where things have changed in your world that we've already seen. These are not new things. These are just ways that the world is evolving. And the more we can embrace that and think about that and acknowledge the change that we've already gone through, the easier it will be to go forward into the tool set. So the tool set is this. There are huge numbers of tools, academic tools, business tools that we can use. And I want to kind of put them into a very broad picture here. It's a compass. This compass encompasses all of the models that you could use, that I could teach, or that you are already using. And remember, you just want to hold on to those tools that are going to help you. So how you can read the future. The very first step is to gather intelligence. You've been here for the last few days gathering intelligence about the world that you live and work in. And that intelligence is going to serve you going forward. The second stage is to explore change, to recognize how far you've come in processes, in work that has changed, in the growth of your own businesses. All these things have changed, and they will continue to change, and we need to recognize that we as humans sometimes don't like change. For example, we like change when we initiate it. We don't like change when it's imposed on us. So if you go to the doctor for a checkup, and the doctor takes all of your measurements and says to you, you're a little overweight, your blood pressure is too high, your cholesterol is too high, you have to go on a diet, you have to start exercising. Your very first reaction, and some of you are already feeling this, is like, who is going to tell me what to do? You want to kind of rebel against that. So you rebel against what the doctor says. If you go home and you tell your partner what the doctor has said, you've made a big mistake, because next morning your partner is going to kick you out of bed early so that you can go and exercise. So you kind of reject all of that. But if you woke up on your birthday or on the 1st of January, which are the days that we normally make these big decisions, you go, okay, that's it. I'm not healthy enough, I want to get better, my cholesterol is too high, my blood pressure is too high, I'm going to go on a diet, I'm going to lose some weight, and we start taking those actions ourselves, then we can embrace them. When we can understand that very simple human condition, that we don't want to always be told what to do, that we want to be part of co-creating things, then it's so much easier to work with the people who have experience in particular elements of your supply chain decision-making, and you can actually make some progress with them. So that's exploring change. Our third stage then is to describe the future. And this is where we're starting to look at scenarios, and we'll look at a set in just a moment. And then the last stage is to test your strategy. Now, that looks deceptively simple, but any futures program that you ever work on, any futurist that ever comes into your office, any movie or program or webinar you ever watch from a futurist, whatever they're talking about will fall somewhere into one of those 4 categories, if not the whole thing. And if you just look at those 4 categories and you apply them to the next decisions that you're making in the office, you will be futurists as well. And it's important for us to think about that, or think like that, because we are all natural futurists. We can be more intentional and better at it, but we're all natural futurists. And in fact, the whole futures field came out of military supply chain problems back in like in World War II. When they started trying to get that process correct in terms of serving the military, that's when they started to develop the futures thinking model. So if all of you want to go and update your profiles to say that you're also a futurist, that is absolutely the correct thing to do with the experience that you have. I want to present some scenarios here very briefly. A scenario is how you look at the future. So we're looking at in the middle, this kind of middle scenario, this normal scenario that we're in, that the world is getting faster, it's exponential, we have to keep up. We have to learn things and understand, and there's so many changes, and how are we going to keep up with all of these things that are out there, including all the legislation and all the different rules and all the different technologies that have to talk to each other. And it can be quite an exhausting space to be in. Another way to look at a scenario, another scenario that you can create, is one where you're going to intentionally start to create things in decisions, new processes, new ideas. You're going to explore from different fields so that you can prepare new ideas, new processes for yourself, for your company, for your clients that are novel and unique. You're going to go and break some of the models, throw out the old models that don't work, and take Nomu as a inspirational model and go and do something that is radical and a little bit risky, because you need to create new things. And the bigger risk is trying to stay in a place that doesn't work anymore. The third scenario that we very often encounter is a nostalgic one. And that's when people look back on the past and say, no, we used to do it this way. It was better when we did it this way. It was better when we didn't have to worry about all of these issues. And again, you're going to hear that in your office any day of the week. Somebody is harking back to back when they felt safe and secure in the knowledge that they had, and they didn't feel uncertain and insecure about what is coming in the future. And just in case you are that kind of inspirational person who wants to go and break all the rules and be a disruptor and create new things, that's fantastic. But all of us at some point in our lives just want to be safe for a day or two. We sometimes, all of us, will kind of harken back to that time and place when we felt safe. So give each other a little bit of grace as we're trying to move into the future. But those are 3 standard scenarios that we're seeing all around the world. In terms of politics and economics, there are people wanting to break things and change things, and people who want to go back to when they and their in-group felt safe. And as soon as you can see that and recognize it, it's so much easier to make decisions in the future. The Red Queen hypothesis. This is a story from Through the Looking Glass, the Alice in Wonderland story with Lewis Carroll. And in this one, the queen is taking Alice through the garden, but something happens and they have to start running. And they're running really, really fast, and they're not moving at all. And the Red Queen says to Alice, she says, now here you see, in our world, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. And that is what so many of us are doing. So the Red Queen hypothesis is actually used in terms of a kind of like biological progression with species that are kind of evolving. And the actual definition is a species must constantly adapt evolve and proliferate in order to survive. So a species that wants to survive out in the wild needs to adapt, evolve, and proliferate. It needs to keep running faster and faster in order to make sure that it's still going to survive. Now, we want to find from that some wisdom. We want to adapt and evolve. We don't need to proliferate. Yes, more sales would be nice, but we don't as a species need to keep proliferating and producing more and more noise and more junk. We want to adapt and evolve and create things of value for the world. But that Red Queen hypothesis is an interesting way to look at the future, because we're either like the Emperor or like the Red Queen, running faster and faster just to keep up. And that space, that anxiety that the Emperor had, where he would chop off the courtier's head, or the stress that the Red Queen would have, that she'd have to run so fast just to stay in the same place, is what so many of us are experiencing in the workplace. And it's not helpful to us. So that's why we want to think in a different way and use different tools that we can actually embrace the future in a way that is more meaningful. So a very intentional approach. Mindset, learn the tool set, develop the skill in order to face the future. Now, that is why you've been here for the last few days. That's why you've been at this conference. And I looked through the list, the agenda of all the different workshops and meetings. And I'm going to ask you to forgive me if there's anything here that you think should have been in that I've left out. But I went through this list. Demand-driven material requirements, peak performance, systematically strengthening systems, creating resilience, design thinking, engagement, artificial intelligence, together in partnership, future-proof. It's a marathon, not a sprint. A new era, how to leverage data analytics, impact on climate change, increasing youth engagement, planning and collaboration, essential to responding to disruptions, pushing the boundaries through innovation, the ESG score, anything about drones, the people link ready for tomorrow, carbon mapping, and women in supply chain. That and everything else that you've been looking at, hearing, discussing, seeing over the last few days is exactly what you need to be doing in order to start thinking exponentially, to start thinking differently about the future. I don't want you to feel like you have to leave here and go and learn a lot of new things. What you've already experienced here is what you need to do in order to prepare for the future. And if there's any of these workshops that you missed out on, any of the content, find a way to get hold of that content and engage with it. Have the conversations with each other. Keep exploring this, because that's how you prepare for tomorrow. Not by hiding away, not by rejecting and denying the truth of how fast our world is changing. And not by running frantically, just trying to keep up with whatever's in front of you, but by very intentionally coming away for a few days to an event like this, to learn and be in the company of people, to engage with people, so that you can start to think differently. So you're all futurists. You've all been on a learning spree over the last few days. And my last and final advice to you to prepare for the future is to make sure that you sign up for the 46th annual SAPICS convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. This was really insightful. When MJ was speaking at our executive summit on Friday, MJ is our SAPICS president of the board. She was also quoting from the EY, is it EY or PwC? CEO survey of 2023, where the overwhelming response was evolve or die. And I think this reiterates that sentiment. Thank you very much, Charlotte. We appreciate.